I don't want to talk about it. That's not true. I do want to talk about it, but also I don't want to. Do I even want to read on? I just feel like everything is just gonna be terrible. Everything is just gonna be worse. And I feel like book 3 should have really been the lowest point. Does it go lower? Does it have to go lower? Wen Ning. My beautiful boy. My beautiful boy, Wen Ning. He was already dead. Hi, my name is Cranes. I'm reading MDZS for the first time. I haven't watched it Untamed, so please no spoilers. I've just read the first half of chapter 16, so the first part of this book. And when I say I just read it, I read it like 3 days ago. But then I got busy and life sort of took over. But now I need to talk about it before I can move on because I have thoughts. Most of them are sad and like incredulous because I just cannot believe that I did not see that coming. Even when they were there, even when they arrived there, in the valley where the Wen clan survivors were hiding, even then I was convinced that Wen Ning was still alive. For some reason, the possibility of him dying off screen, off page, just did not even occur to me. Okay, maybe in all honesty, I'd also forgotten that he was gonna die. I'm very bad at this. I hadn't like forgotten. I just had momentarily lacked the awareness that the Wen Ning that is in the present, although he is, able to reflect and understand and talk, is actually not alive anymore. Wen Ning as symbol for the collateral damage of war. I don't know, are we really doing this? Are we really using this like tender-hearted, loyal, morally just through and through good and sound person as a symbol for how terrible war is and how terrible the Jin clan is? Do we need to do this? Anyway, I had a little cry, particularly about his sister's reaction, because that was haunting. And then I was thinking about Wei Wuxian a whole lot, because it struck me. It struck me all of a sudden that at the end of chapter 15, when Lan Wangqi comes to Lotus Pier to talk to Wei Wuxian and talk him into coming with him to the Cloud Recesses to, basically get checked up and like locked up for what he's doing with the demonic cultivation. When that happens is, I believe, the first time we're stepping outside of Wei Wuxian's point of view in the entire novel since chapter 1. We follow Lan Wangqi down the road, and then he looks up at Wei Wuxian sitting on the balustrades, like looking down at him. We have like the flower throwing scene, and that whole scene is told from Lan Wangqi's perspective, or from a neutral perspective. We're not really privy to Lan Wangqi's interiority, but we're neither privy to Wei Wuxian's interiority, which we're used to. We're used to seeing his perspective and hearing some of his thoughts or understanding some of his feelings. And there we just get nothing. That was chapter 15. And I sort of chucked it up as, oh, interesting. For once we sort of get a different glimpse. And now she did it again. She did it again in this one. She did it again in chapter 16 at the banquet when Wei Wuxian shows up and tells Chin, whatever the fuck. Wait, give me a second. So many names. Where are the names? You don't know how often I have to look up names in this book when I make these videos, but it's a lot. It's Chin Sichun. It's Chin Sichun who he talks to because he wants him to tell him where the Wen clan survivors are, because that's where Wen Ning is, of course. But this entire scene, we're seeing through Lan Wangqi's perspective. We are there with Lan Wangqi before Wei Wuxian even shows up. We just see this like arrogant outside view of Wei Wuxian, and we don't actually see or hear how he decided to make that trip, to make those demands, who he met up with. We know none of that. And I think that is such a bold and fantastic storytelling choice to make after 3 books and just sitting with Wei Wuxian's perspective for the entire time. And now at the point where the whole myth around the Yiling patriarch and this notion of him as a villain, this is when it is constructed, right? Like this first part of book 4, this first part of chapter 16 is when that gets constructed. And it is so necessary that we get a few glimpses of how he came across, of how he was perceived by others. Not because he's wrong or because he makes wrong decisions, not at all. I think we can all agree that he's doing the right thing here, and he calls into question the right, problems in this world. But because it's important to see how the world might see him or the world might perceive him. And as so much of his villainy is constructed out of his disregard for etiquette and for the right way to do things and for accepting and adhering to hierarchies that are set up in this world. He rejects all of this. And this is what he does wrong. This is what makes him a villain, not the fact that he wants to free the Wen clan survivors. He has the correct demands, he has the moral high ground, and yet he still comes across as the villain because he does it out in the open at a banquet, sort of embarrassing the people who are there and not adhering to the right and just way, the right and just hierarchy that are set up by the people in power. Another reason why this perspective shift is important is to highlight that Lan Wangqi is already on his side. Although Lan Wangqi is very much against demonic cultivation, but mostly because he's afraid of what it will do to Wei Wuxian's body and his person and how it will deteriorate him, but morally, he is completely on Wei Wuxian's side. This is a scene right after Wei Wuxian left the banquet again. We're staying with the banquet because we're seeing the whole scene through Lan Wangqi's perspective, and it is just after Wei Wuxian called out the Jin clan for being basically a carbon copy of the Wen clan with the violence they use and, you know, the just harnessing of all spiritual weapons and just the control of power of everyone. And Jin Guangyao is looking around and just observing the mayhem that Wei Wuxian just caused, and he says, Wei Wuxian really is much too harsh. How can he talk like that in front of so many clans? Was he wrong? Lan Wangqi questioned coldly. Jin Guangyao was stunned, but only for a barely noticeable moment before he quickly smiled. Haha, right. He was right. It's so meaningful to me that Lan Wangqi agrees with Wei Wuxian here, even when he's not there, right? He says, Wei Wuxian is right. He's saying facts. You might not like how he says it or where he says it or that he doesn't, you know, adhere to etiquette, that he doesn't tell you behind closed doors. But yeah, you are doing all of the things that we basically just eradicated the Wen clan for. And then, of course, we shift back to Wei Wuxian's perspective. But even that shift, I feel like we're not privy to his interior thoughts as much at this point anymore. Maybe because there's a loss of humanity. Maybe because he's also becoming more of a mythical figure. At this point, he doesn't seem very human to me. All of his actions seem to be driven by this, like, purpose and this conviction that is slightly detached from humanity. Yeah, I think I'll leave it at that. I was gonna go a little bit more into what I think of Wei Wuxian's character arc in this chapter, but frankly, every time I do that and I point out that he has flaws and that he is not a perfect human being, y'all get very defensive. I don't know, maybe at some point I will make a video about why I think analyzing Wei Wuxian is just flawless and as not capable of any wrong makes this a much worse book, but that day is not today. I will continue reading because I want to know what happens. I just remembered one ending. I take it back. I don't think I want to know what happens actually.